Hi there, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DutchRC channel for part 4 in my Sky Hero Anakin build, a quadcopter build. In the last video I left you with a frame with 4 motors, 4 ESCs and a power distribution board. So our 4 ESCs and the motors are now powered up. And in this video we'll be adding a brain to this quadcopter. As you can see, all the signal wires from the ESCs are still hanging around, and we'll be adding a flight controller. A flight controller to our quadcopter. Now this here is an F3 Evo or Evolution flight controller from SP Racing. I got this one from Banggood, and I'll have a link in the description obviously. Now this is a newer version of the F3 boards, and it has some special features, some other design specs and another layout. Especially the pin layout is different for your receiver and such. You'll have to solder up pin headers if you want to use, for instance, the input channels on the right side of the board. I won't be, but you can. And one other feature it has is an SD card reader slot at the bottom. And what is that for? Well, it is for logging, black box logging. The board actually comes with a 4 GB card, but you can add up to a 32 GB card to this board here. So that is a very nice feature, especially for tuning, and if you are looking for solutions to problems your quadcopter might have. A logger, a black box logger, is very convenient. Now in this video I'll be showing you how to hook this board up. I'll also tell you some special considerations for this version of F3 boards you want to take care of or want to keep in mind. One of the most important ones is that these boards do not like vibrations very much. I'll be solving that in several ways. You can also filter that out in the firmware. That's a bit more elaborate or complicated. Well, nothing is complicated if you know how it works, but getting rid of the vibrations in the first place is a better solution, I think. Okay, let's first see what connectors you really need for this board. First a very short look at the bottom of the board, then we can flip it over and concentrate on all the pins we do and do not need. Like I said, at the bottom we have that SD card reader slot, which is very nice, and I've seen that on some versions of these boards there is another connector over here that looks like a UART connector, and that is an SMD connector, I think. It's only used for debugging and firmware updates in case the USB hookup doesn't work. My board does not have such a port. I'm fine with that. Okay, that's the bottom of the board. All other connectors can be reached from the top side. Alright, let's spin the board on up. Okay, now I have to tell you that for some reason this board thinks that this, the USB port, is the front of the board. That's a bit unusual. Yeah, doesn't really matter, of course. And in a few minutes I'll show you how to solve that. That's really easy in CleanFlight or in Betaflight. But that came as a bit of a surprise to me. No biggie. Okay, like I said, at the rear you have your USB port, which you use to connect the flight controller up to your computer and then do configuration in CleanFlight or Betaflight or any other firmware software you want to use. And there are 2 other ports, these white ones. Those are UARTs, COM ports, and I'll use one of those, the right one, for my receiver. This receiver, which is a very small receiver, as you can probably tell. It is a fast receiver though for a Futaba system, so yeah, might not be applicable for you, but it comes with quite a lot of cables. But one of the cables it comes with is this, has this UART connector, so I can hook it up straight to the board. Very nice, no soldering required, thank you very much. And oh, if you are a Futaba user, I'll have a link to this receiver as well in the description down below. If we spin the board around, as you can see, we have some pinholes over here, which you can of course solder pin headers into if you want to use these ports. There are 3 ports for LEDs if you want to have programmable LEDs on your quadcopter. I won't, so I won't be soldering anything to these ports. There is a CRT port, which is for an external current sensor. Yeah, if you have a separate external current sensor, you'll be soldering it up to that CRT port. And then the last one is one that I will be using. It is for a buzzer, the B. It might be a little small on screen for you right now, but here is a ground and a plus for your buzzer, and I will solder a buzzer or a cable from a buzzer directly to the board, so without a pin header. If we turn the board around again, we come to basically the business side of the board. Here are your outputs. So you have, as you can probably tell, 8 outputs. This board can accommodate up to an octocopter. And in my build, of course, I will be using 4 outputs. So to these pinholes you will connect all your ESCs. And the board comes with a myriad of pin headers, bent and straight up. Depending on what kind of build you're using, you'll have to figure out what fits best. Or if you are building a very small quadcopter, if you don't have a lot of space, you might want to opt to solder your ESC signal wires directly to the board. I won't, because I want to have the option of replacing the board if I want to review or test something else. Okay, 8 output ports, and then there is another 2-pin pair that says boot, and that is to set or start your board in bootloader mode. Sometimes that's required if you want to flash on a different firmware, or if you have kind of bricked your board. You can short these 2 pinholes, and then your board will accept a new firmware, more or less. Okay, so I'll be adding a pin header to that as well. If we move the board around again, here are quite a few pinholes that I will not be using. Over here there is a 3rd UART out. So this is a UART, this is a UART, and this is a UART, and this 3rd UART does not come with pins or a plastic connector. If you want to use that 3rd UART, you will have to solder up pin headers to it. I probably don't have a need for that. Like I said, the board already has 2 and I will only be using 1. So, okay, and over here the 3 pins very close to each other are for Spectrum satellite receivers. Like I said before, I will be using a Futaba system, so I don't need those. Then there are PPM and S-Bus ins over here. And yeah, like I said, I will be using this UART port for my receiver, so I don't need those. And the last one, the plus, the V and the minus ground, is for your VBET in or VCC. So you will basically connect your LiPo straight to this or a cable from your PDB in most cases to this port. and with that your board will have insight in your battery voltage. Now I've come across quite a few diagrams that say that you can't power this board from this port or these two pins. I'm not sure. If that's the case, you'll have to power it by providing 5 volts to this rail over here at the front of the board. I will first try it. This VBAT in can take up to 6S. I'll connect it up to my flight control or my power distribution board, and we'll see if the board powers up. And if it doesn't, yeah, I'll have to add a 5 volt in to this rail over here. No biggie, of course. Okay, what I'll be doing now is solder up pin headers for this VBAT in for my 4 ESCs, and that is basically everything I need to do, so I'll go and do that right now. Okie dokie, we have some pin headers on our board. Over here the two pins for the 4S in, the VBAT. Over here 4 output pins for my ESCs, and I have added an extra 2 pins over here in case I do have to power the board with 5 volt as well. And I have soldered a buzzer to the board. Now the only problem I ran into is that it was hard to see what the plus and minus or ground of this buzzer was. And actually you might have seen those round buzzers, right? I always find them hard to mount, or not so handy to mount, so I've gone and looked for a flat buzzer, which is this one. And yeah, I'll have a link to that buzzer for you as well if you are interested. And let's see. Yeah, let's get back to the frame for a minute. Okay, as you can see, I have already secured my receiver onto the board. It'll live underneath the flight controller. Here are the standoffs for my flight controller. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, these F3 Evo boards do not like vibrations. So what have I done to get rid of vibrations? Well, I could have put rubber spacers in between the board and these standoffs. What I've done, however, is coat the top of the standoffs with a rubber, Plastidip, paintable rubber. And will act mostly the same as a rubber washer, of course, but these you can't lose if you're working on your quadcopter. The second thing I've done is, yeah, I've ordered a quadcopter with very thick arms. So those will kind of smother vibrations, not all of it, but less vibrations will be transferred by these arms. And the last thing I've done, I have selected a mostly vibration-free setup. I have balanced my propellers, and the propellers themselves are pretty efficient as well. They don't produce a lot of noise, and noise is vibration. So yeah, I hope that helps enough. Otherwise I'll have to get into the flight controller settings to filter out the vibrations. Alright, I'll go and install the board, hook up my ESCs, and then we'll test, like I said before, if this VBAT in over here, if that actually powers my board. Otherwise, like I said, I'll have to power it with the 5 volt in at the front. And what do you know? We have a quadcopter with a flight controller. It's starting to look like a real quadcopter by now. Okay, straight up, I should tell you that indeed this board needs a 5 volt input. This VBAT in does not power the board. It only provides the board with info on the status of your LiPo. Yeah, I would have liked it to power the board, but it is what it is. It's not a problem, of course. I added a 5th cable over here on the front rail, and that powers the board. Actually, let me hook up a LiPo. There, we got some beeps and stuff, and I can actually arm it. There, as you can probably see, I have a motor spin on, always. Okay, and I've also got the beeper installed. Cool, and I have set up 3 flight modes, yeah. Okay, I could have shortened these ASC wires. Do remember though that my quadcopter has a canopy, so you won't see these wires at all. And yeah, let me show you my clean flight configuration. Probably will be replaced with a beta flight configuration later on, but the basic setup and the first test flights, clean flight, will do just fine. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's get things started. Radio on, all switches up, HCD, connect up a LiPo. Okay, and we connect up the USB to the flight controller. There. Okay, clean flight, we say connect. Hartstikke, we are connected, and as you can hopefully see, the animation of the quadcopter in clean flight moves the right way around. I'll show you how I have done that. Let's first take a look at my ports though. As you can see here, I have set the second UART, the UART2, the 3rd line from the top, to receive my serial RX receiver signal. As I mentioned before, I use that small little port next to the USB port on the flight controller for my radio, for my receiver. So that UART2 needs to be set to serial RX for that to work. Okay, the second thing, configuration. As you can see at the right top, I have not engaged motor stop. So that's why my motors always spin when I have the quadcopter armed. Yeah, that's a personal preference, I think. I have obviously engaged one-shot 125, and this firmware doesn't support the other one-shots. And the second important thing on this page I had to change is this yaw degrees on the left. I had to set that to 180 degrees. Yeah, I'm not sure why this board thinks that USB port is at the front of the board, but I wanted to have that USB port at the rear of my quadcopter. So, yeah, 180 degrees yaw, and that solves that. Let's go to the receiver tab. At the bottom of the receiver tab, I have selected RX serial at the left over here, and SBus in the right table. So with that UART2 selected to serial RX and D settings, I now have a working receiver. Okay, and what modes have I set up? Well, as you can see, I've set up one mode for the arm switch. There, now my quadcopter is armed. I don't have arming on a stick, as you can probably tell. I have set up angle and horizon mode, and acro mode is my third mode. And at the very bottom I have set up a beeper and an air mode. The beeper is in the middle of my arming switch, so if I move my second aux 2 to the middle, the quadcopter will start beeping, and if I move it all the way down, my quadcopter is armed. That way I can always hear when I arm or disarm my quadcopter. And I have engaged air mode. As you can see, I have air mode engaged in horizon mode and in acro mode. And that is basically it. Yeah, obviously I have calibrated all my ESCs, and I have tried to set the minimum throttle. For some reason the board won't save that setting. Maybe it has a minimum setting? I'll have to look that up actually. Nevertheless, the quadcopter will fly this way. So, yeah, that's it for this video. If you have any questions about my build or this F3 Evo flight controller, don't hesitate to ask. I'll be happy to help you. And let's see the next video in this build series. I'll be adding FPV gear, and that's it. That's all the build work I have left on this Anakin Skywalker build. Okay, I hope this was somewhat informative for you, and I hope to see you back in another video. Bye bye.